start. Before addressing the elephant in the room, I'm just gonna state my general thoughts real quick. It's good most of the time, jaw-dropping, bafflingly bad occasionally, and great sometimes when it works. The game doesn't live up to the hype. Those expectations of this next-gen, ultimate cyberpunk role-playing experience, because it's a big f***ing mess, with a lot that needs to be addressed, and if it's not number one, then it's up there as far as worst video game launches of all time go. And with all of that, it just might have been my favorite game of 2020. Because I had a lot of fun. Because I could play the game. Because I wasn't on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One. Now let's get to that elephant. Holy shit. If somehow you don't know, the game does not work on last-gen consoles. On PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, the game was, and still is at the time of writing, unplayable. I am astounded as to how this happened. The game was announced in 2012 and set to release on April 16th, 2020, but after it got delayed, and went gold, and delayed, and got hella memed for it, it came out on December 10th. Almost half a year later from release, and it still doesn't fucking work on last-gen consoles. It's a buggy, volatile, unfinished port. And what I find kind of funny about it is that the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 came out about a month before Cyberpunk 2077. What would have happened if they pushed out the game on the original date of April 26th, and next-gen just wasn't around? Imagine releasing a game that only works on a third of the platforms available, and it's fuck you PlayStation, fuck you Xbox, Stadia doesn't count, and PC, you can play, but it'll be loaded with bugs. Call me an idiot, but I do have faith that CD Projekt Red will eventually get the game to a playable state on last gen. But that launch? Wow. So with that show out of the way, you customize your character. V. Pick a life path, instantly regret some of the choices you made because it feels like you're wasting what little time you have left on this planet as a soulless, number-crunching corpo working for a $1 trillion company that doesn't care about you when you could have quit when you were younger and followed your dreams of owning the world's biggest gumball collection. And you fuck up your appearance because your forehead looks big enough to screen movies in IMAX. Shit happens and you start from square one in Night City. Through the power of montage, you move up in the world of organized crime with your bro Migo, Jackie Wells. After getting a taste of his shooting, stealth, and abhorrent melee combat in the tutorial, you get hired by a big-time fixer by the name of Dexter Deshawn to steal a one-of-a-kind biochip he calls the Relic. From Yorinobu Arasaka, son of Saburo, the most powerful man in the world and owner of the mega corporation by the same family name. Shit goes sideways, and after a crash landing, the case for the chip is cracked. So to keep its integrity, we put it in our heads and fight our way out of Konpeki Plaza relatively easily. We get back to Dexter and he's pissed because what was supposed to be a quiet in-and-out 20-minute adventure turned into... So he says fuck this shit and just wants to wash his hands clean of everything.
Can't risk it, V. Remember our first convo?
I'll fucking kill you!
Seems I've chosen the quiet life after all. No blaze of glory for me.
Surprise, surprise, the game isn't over even though we took a round to the dome. Turns out the relic in the back of our brain reconstructed the missing parts from the bullet, so the relic saved us. But it's also killing us. The biochip had an engram, pretty much a dead person's psyche on it, and it's doing a sort of hostile takeover of V's mind. Over time, V's consciousness will slowly, painfully be erased and replaced with whoever is on that biochip. In a couple weeks, it'll be the same body, different person on the inside. That different person is Johnny Silverhand. So you need to find a way to get this metal-armed, alcoholic, self-absorbed rockstar ghost terrorist out of your mind while he's with you every step of the way. From what I've seen him in, Keanu Reeves is very hit or miss depending on the role. He doesn't really have the widest range with his unique cadence and monotone delivery, so I know I don't speak for everyone when I say this, but in my opinion, he fucking kills it in this game. That sort of subdued way of speaking really works for Johnny, and it kinda reminds me of other rock frontmen who are also very distinctive with their voice. Every other voice actor does a great job too, really making the characters they play feel real, and that along with the writing makes you really care about these people you meet throughout the main and side quests. The side quests are great, with the big ones having to do with some of the game's best characters and what's going on in their lives. Aside from character-focused quests, there's some other smaller ones and filler activities spread throughout the city like gang shootouts or cyber psychos. I didn't really care about the gang ones, but the cyber psychos did have some interesting backstories here and there. The main quest in general is pretty good, though it did take me like 6 hours to get past the prologue, so if you don't care about what's happening early, it might be a slog before the real story kicks in. There's also the problem how the story emphasizes how you need to solve the Johnny dilemma fast before you essentially die. So in universe, your character should blast through everything as quickly as possible to save himself. But as the player, wouldn't you want to take your time with this big new open world and side quests? V's mental state is actually tied to how many main missions you do, making the urgency artificial, so I'm not sure why the game tells the player they have X amount of time left. I'm also not sure what to talk about next, so... Cyberpunk was touted as this revolutionary, deep, next-gen role-playing game where you could really make your character in this living, breathing world. But the game we got wasn't exactly that kind of experience. This game handles a lot of its RPG elements pretty much the exact same way The Witcher 3 did. You don't start off with a character that's a blank slate that you can fill with whatever. You start with character X. In The Witcher you had Geralt, in this game you have V. You have flexibility in how this character acts and handles situations, but you can't make any radical shifts in any direction, because at the end of the day, you're still playing as Geralt, or you're still playing as V. Making Cyberpunk with the same design philosophy as The Witcher is completely fine in my book, especially since CD Projekt Red did a damn good job with it before. But the problem was they didn't tell the public they were making Witcher with guns in Night City. They told people ultimate cutting-edge, blow-your-mind open-world experience. So when people played the game after years of that being hammered into their heads, a lot of them said something like, "What the f***? Where's the rest of it?" 2077 actually gives you more role-playing elements than The Witcher, like full character customization, more skills, clothes, different character backgrounds. But again, none of these shift V too much, and they aren't game-changing in the way that it was marketed as. For example, each life path, Corbo, Street Kid, Nomad, gives you a different starting point for the game, but that starting point will pretty quickly get to a certain point where that path will just amount to some different dialogue here and there. It's a cool small thing, but not much more. I have seen some opinions online how this game isn't even an RPG, and I disagree with that quite a bit. Sure, it's not Fallout 1 or 2 or even New Vegas, but come on guys, it is an RPG. But what about the experience of actually playing the game? The combat with guns is surprisingly good. For CD Projekt Red's first attempt at a first-person shooter after years of medieval sword fighting in Gwent, I'd say they did a pretty good job. My main criticisms are that it needs a bit more enemy variety, people can be bullet sponges, especially on the hard difficulty, and the AI when it comes to combat scenarios is serviceable but could be a lot better. Otherwise, the whole shooting, reloading, throwing grenade stuff feels pretty good. And I'll say it again, first try. Remember how it took the Fallout franchise 3 times before the S part of the FPS didn't suck? Stealth in 2077 is just okay. Kinda cookie cutter, I'm not really sure what else I can say about it. Hacking is a bit more notable. You have RAM that you get more of by leveling up, buying cyberware, or downloading from websites that seem completely free of malware. You can use hacking in a couple different ways. Overheat somebody's tech, disable their optics for a short time, short-circuit robots, ping for more info about surrounding enemies. It's a simple but fun system. The way I see it, it's pretty much like spells in other games. RAM is mana, hacking is magic. I even read a post about how somebody put all their attribute points in hacking and became a sort of cyber wizard just blowing people up with his mind. I used all of mine on revolver perks, so I was more of a big iron having cowboy, but it's super cool to see different ways to play the game. So the sword to gun transition was good. The horse to car one, not as good. Driving's iffy. It kinda reminds me of GTA 4, how there's a bit of a learning curve and at times it feels like the roads are coated in butter. I understand that every car isn't meant to be amazing. If I'm driving a brick-on-wheels luxury Land Cruiser, I'm not expecting it to carve through canyons, but driving just doesn't feel very fun a lot of the time. Though there are a couple of cars that have some interesting driving mechanics, and I think it's hilarious how the best handling car in the game is the Porsche. The last thing I have to say about driving is I thought it was a very interesting choice for the engineers in the year 2077 to use brake pads made of jelly, because almost every car across the board takes a while to come to a complete stop. Unless you try to hop out of the car while it's moving 200 miles an hour.
I don't know what that was.
That, my friend, is a part of what I like to call the shit list. A collection of problems that you'd think they would try to get sorted out, and probably tried, but are still there. Before I just start listing stuff off, I just want to talk about a glitch really quick. In my 77-ish hours of playtime, the most annoying one I got on PC, which happened to me like 5 times, was when I was done speaking to someone over the phone, usually at the end of a side mission. Their character just wouldn't hang up. They would just silently stay in the top right corner, not doing anything. When it happened to me, the game wouldn't save automatically, and I couldn't save it manually, so whatever I recently did was meaningless, and I'd have to quit and go back in. There was also a side mission with thermal paste I couldn't complete, and a lot of naked T-posing, but I didn't really mind that because it was kind of funny. And now we're off to the shit list. Spawning in general can be horrendous at times. For crowds and cars, you'll go for long stretches in what seems like a nuclear wasteland because there isn't a living soul within hundreds of miles, but look away for a second and you'll be bombarded with traffic and tsunamis of people. Get a high wanted level and the NCPD will just start teleporting around you. If your stationary car spills onto the road by even a millimeter, it'll halt cars for miles and miles and they will never move around it. The way crowds react to danger is laughable. Shadows. Just shadows. The minimap in the corner doesn't zoom out no matter how fast you're going, so you'll constantly miss highway ramps and turns unless you have Barry Allen's reflexes. So all of these problems range from annoyances to immersion-shattering constants. The former wears on you, and the latter just makes the world feel hollow, which is a real shame because of just how beautiful it looks and how amazing it sounds. In a year where Doom Eternal and Final Fantasy VII Remake both came out with soundtracks that slapped hard enough to cook a goddamn chicken, Cyberpunk 2077 came out swinging with gorilla arms. Paul Leonard Morgan, P.T. Autumncheck, and Marcin Przybylovich murdered the sound in this game. In a good way. Ranging from somber and introspective, to nail-biting suspense, to blood-pumping bangers, there's a good bit of variety with the music outside the radio, and even more from it. There's the usual hip-hop, pop, metal, jazz, electronic stations to name a few, with a lot of the new music being made specifically for this game. Like No Save Point by Run the Jewels, which was a f***ing perfect collaboration because Killer Mike and LP are well versed in verses about everything going to shit, and Cyberpunk taking place in the shithole that is Night City. A dark, dystopian, beautiful shithole with a ton of variety in its districts. The city center, Watson, Westbrook, Haywood, Santo Domingo, Pacifica, and southern and eastern Badlands all have their own flair, and within them are interesting sub-districts. A couple of my favorites were Little China, Coastview, and North Oak. And while most of my footage is kinda grainy because I left on screen space reflections and it's a bit choppy in the FPS department, this game is beautiful, without a doubt. Aside from the PS1 food and the children that just look like adults that got shrunken down, everything else is awesome. Car designs and interiors, landmarks, architecture, there's some really interesting weather shifts that happen occasionally. The art design and the audio were the two things that never failed to impress me on my playthrough. So it really bummed me out when my car teleports into a wall, or the AI spazzes out, and any of that immersion I had is just gone. These problems really let the game down big time, and it's especially disappointing when the solutions to all of this shit has been shown before, over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Do you remember the word I used earlier to describe the melee combat earlier in the video? I could have talked about this when I went over the combat or the shit list, but I really think it deserved its own spot. It is so broken and downright atrocious that I have to assume the person who was in charge of this was trying to sabotage the game. Beat on the Brat is a side quest where you fight to prove yourself as a contender for this big hunk of shit you see on screen right now. The hand-to-hand combat in these missions is god-awful. The animations are stilted and unnatural, you die in about 2 hits, while everybody you fight has the granite chin of Marvin Hagler and takes what seems like an eternity to put away. On top of that, I guess everybody's an airbender because I'm 6 feet away from these people and their fists are nowhere near me, but I get hurt for some reason and lose. So it's one of two things. 1, he's an airbender, or 2, the combat is f***ing garbage. At a certain point, I just said f*** it and ran in circles so my health could regen and I could just sneak a jab every now and then. And Buck. Buck. He talks all of this shit, and when I beat him and it's time for him to give me the fucking sniper rifle, him and his buddies tried to kill me. And I died, so I had to restart from the very beginning of the fight. And when I got past all that shit and kill his friends, for some reason, you can't kill Buck. He doesn't show up again, so why can't you just let me murk this motherfucker? CD Projekt Red, in the next patch or hotfix or whatever, make it so you could fucking end this dude. That, or just delete this entire fucking side quest from the game. It is the worst part, without a doubt. Okay. If you've gotten this far, you might be asking how could this game be one of my favorites from last year. And yeah, this game's a shit show. Even if the game ran smoothly on every platform and there were no technical hiccups whatsoever, it would still need a lot of work and polish. There's no way to change how your character looks after the beginning, so if you regret something, you're fucked. I was lucky because I found a headband to cover up my atrocious hairline, but other people won't have that option. There's no barbers, tattoo artists, plastic surgeons, no options for metal arms or skin. There's no mini games or ways to eat food that isn't scripted or just clicking on a menu and seeing your stat boost or whatever. You can't see BDs, there's no vehicle customization, like at all. So if you like the colors on that Kusanagi you saw earlier, tough, go look for another one. AI in the combat is just fine, like a 5 out of 10, but in every other situation it's garbage. Racing is broken because the game just keeps spawning cars behind you for artificial difficulty, driving needs to be tweaked, melee completely overhauled, and on top of all that shit, I had a blast. I really enjoyed interacting with the characters, exploring the world, getting into gunfights, and occasionally I would find myself getting lost in this world. You know, before the occasional naked T-pose or plummet in performance. I think as a whole the game is greater than the sum of its parts, and I enjoyed it very much, but I know it won't work for everybody. So unless you're just dying to play it, just wait like a year from now. By then it'll be cheaper, run better, and have more stuff. Assuming the developers do what they said they would do and claw their way out of this buggy mess they made. If that happens, and they work with the chassis of what they have and build on it by adding some of what's missing and polish it a bit, Cyberpunk 2077 still wouldn't be the game it was hyped up to be. But it sounds like a pretty fun game, and it would tap into some of that potential that is painfully unfulfilled right now. So that's the video. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see anything in the future, be sure to subscribe here and or follow me on Twitter for updates. The next video will probably be on RE7 and or 8. I haven't really decided if I should combine them or just split them into 2 videos, but that'll probably be next. Later.